Today, we're stepping into the ring for one of the biggest fights in the modern world. It's a real heavyweight clash between making money and doing the right thing. And, this tension, it defines just about everything. The products we buy, the companies we work for, even the shape of our global economy.
So let's start with a question that sounds simple but really isn't. It's at the heart of this entire debate. What is the one single job of a business? Seriously, how you answer that pretty much determines which side of the ring you're on.
And that brings us to our two main contenders. In one corner, you've got the profit motive. The idea, championed by economists like Milton Friedman, is that a business has one duty and one duty only: make as much money as possible for its owners. Simple. But in the other corner, you have the ethical stance. This side argues that, hold on, businesses are a part of society. They have a basic duty to follow ethical rules, whether that's about protecting people or the planet. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into the whole debate over corporate social responsibility. Then we'll see how globalization just raises the stakes on everything. After that, we'll put these ideas to the test with the really tough issue of sweatshops. And finally, we'll lay out the two main ethical blueprints that guide all these decisions. All right, first up, corporate social responsibility, or CSR, as you'll probably hear it called. This is really the main arena where the fight between profit and purpose happens. And the big question here is, are a company's good deeds for real, or is it all just good PR? So what even is CSR? Well, at its core, it's the idea that a company's job doesn't just stop with making money. It also has a real responsibility to the world around it, to the environment it operates in, and to the people and communities it impacts. Now, this responsibility kind of breaks down into two main areas. First, you've got the environmental stuff. This is all the things we hear about constantly, right? Companies trying to reduce their pollution, switching to renewable energy, or maybe planting a bunch of trees so they can call themselves carbon neutral. And if that first part is about the planet, the other side of the CSR coin is all about people. We're talking about respecting human rights, making sure there's no exploitation or child labor anywhere in the supply chain, and providing fair wages and safe places to work. Oh, and of course, this is where philanthropy comes in, all those big charitable donations that make the news. Now, the people who are for CSR, they make a very practical argument. They say, look, this isn't just about being fuzzy and nice. Good ethics is actually just good business. Think about it. A positive public image brings in more customers. And if you regulate yourself, you can often avoid government stepping in with expensive rules. So in this view, doing good and making a profit go perfectly hand in hand. But, and this is a big but, here comes the critique, and it's a powerful one. This quote from Anand Giridharadas just cuts right to the chase. It points out this deep, kind of uncomfortable irony when a company's big act of charity seems to be fixing a problem that, well, the company itself is helping to cause. And really, that whole critique boils down to this one simple, powerful idea. The argument is that the world doesn't really need another corporate-sponsored charity race. What it actually needs is for those same corporations to just stop causing so much harm to begin with. So the bottom line of the critique is this. CSR is often nothing more than hypocritical window dressing. It's this shiny, feel-good story designed to distract all of us from the not-so-great stuff happening behind the scenes, like aggressive tax avoidance or fighting against unions. It looks like a moral compass, but critics say it's often just a PR campaign. Okay, so let's raise the stakes. This whole ethical clash gets way, way more complicated when companies go global, when they start to build up so much power that they can sometimes even rival entire countries. I mean, globalization has totally changed the game. It's this massive weaving together of economies and markets all across the planet. And what it's done is give these giant multinational corporations a level of power and influence that would have been totally unimaginable just a few generations ago. And, with all that power comes a potential dark side. A global reach lets companies move jobs to countries with lower wages and fewer rules. Huge corporations can flex their financial muscle to pressure governments to change laws to benefit them. And they can get so big that they become monopolies, just swallowing up their competitors. Think about Facebook buying Instagram and killing the very competition that a healthy market is supposed to have. Now, what's so fascinating here is who said this? This isn't some anti-capitalist activist. This is Milton Friedman, the ultimate cheerleader for the free market. He saw the paradox. The system of capitalism needs competition to work, but any single business within that system would love nothing more than to wipe out all of its competition and become a monopoly.
The drive for profit can actually lead companies to try and break the system that lets them exist.
Okay, all of this theory can feel a little abstract. So let's bring it right down to earth with a really brutal test case. A place where these different ethical ideas just collide head on. The sweatshop.
So what is a sweatshop? Well, it's defined by just horrific conditions. It's unsafe, the hours are endless, the pay is next to nothing, and all too often it involves child labor. It is the absolute textbook definition of exploitation, of taking advantage of people who feel like they have no other choice. And this is where our two big ethical frameworks have a spectacular crash. On one side, you have an argument that only looks at the results, at the consequences. It says, look, as awful as a sweatshop is, if we boycott it, we might make things even worse for the workers, because that terrible job might be the best option they've got. That's the utilitarian defense. But on the other side is a view based on unbreakable moral rules. It argues the results don't matter, because sweatshops are just always wrong. Why? Because they treat human beings like they're just tools for making a profit, and that violates a fundamental duty to respect their humanity. That's the Kantian critique. And I want to be clear, this is not just some philosophical game. The stakes are literally life and death. In Bangladesh, workers at a factory knew their building was unsafe. They could see the cracks, but they were told if they didn't go back to work, they'd lose a whole month's pay. So they went back inside. The building collapsed, and over 1,000 people were killed. That is the devastating human cost of these ethical debates. So after seeing that intense conflict, let's just step back for a second and really compare the two major ethical blueprints that have been running through this whole discussion. I mean, how are we actually supposed to decide what the right thing to do is?
Okay, so let's break these two down side by side. For utilitarianism, what matters most are the consequences, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In that view, something like exploitation could be justified if in the long run it creates a better outcome for society as a whole. But its huge weakness is what's called the calculation problem. How could you possibly know all the ripple effects of a decision? Now, for Kantian ethics, what matters is duty and your intention. Exploitation is always wrong, period. No exceptions. But its weakness is a kind of consequences problem of its own. It can force you to stick to a rule, even if you can see that following that rule is going to lead to a terrible real-world disaster. And the most important thing to take away from all this is that this isn't some dusty, historical debate from a philosophy class. This is a live, ongoing conflict. This tension between these two ways of thinking is playing out right now, every single day, in the global supply chains that bring us our phones, our clothes, and our food. Which leaves us with one final, very difficult question. We all like to think that good ethics is good business. But what happens when it's not? When a company is really forced to choose between making the most profit and doing the right thing, which one should win?